Hola, listeners, and welcome to High Tea Mystique with your hosts, Kat.
And I'm Tess. And Pam.
In a world changing faster than the time it takes to brew a cup of tea,
High Tea Mystique reminds you that no experience is too big or too small to teach us something about ourselves. So join us for a cup of tea as we steep into adulting, womanhood, independence, and more.
This is the show. This is the show, ladies and gentlemen.
This is live.
This is live.
In
Well,
3,
it is live for
2.
us.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah.
A live recording.
Hold on. I thought I had moved you all.
Oh, wow. It's a live switch. That's fun. Transition.
And scene.
How did I get here?
Magic.
You were moved virtually.
The magic of the Mystique.
There are some things that really the YouTube viewers here really get the best experience.
Or Spotify video.
You know? Or Spotify video. But let me tell you, video is really an experience. If you're not doing it, you should consider it. Just saying. I think I speak for a lot of us when I say that this month has felt like an eternity with no time in between. There has literally been so much going on back to back, and yet there is no time to do anything else.
Amen.
Mm-hmm. That is the truth. It's crazy how everybody you talk to. I think it's nice. I think maybe it's a reflection of like the people that I am around, but I think everybody's being very mindful of the fact that everyone is super busy right now, for the most part. So I just think it's interesting how I think I forget every year. And I think this year's going to be less stressful because maybe I am doing something like different from last year to try and make things less stressful, but I always end up saying yes to too many things.
I mean, I feel like the thing is, it has, at least for me and a lot of the people that I know, it's not even that you're saying yes to things. It's just that things you really can't say no to are just happening all at the same time. You know, like I just had my sister's wedding, then I finished, and then we had to go through the whole move. Like I can't say no to those things, but they all just happen to line up within the same time frame. You know, it's just too much.
It's such a lesson in valuing your time because you really don't have a lot to give when things are like non-negotiable, right? So here we are in each other's time. So we're especially grateful for it. Hi, Team Mystique again, together again, for our listeners here, for our audiences. We're coming together, and this is actually our second to last episode of our season. Season 2. It felt like it started yesterday, and here we are, about to end another year, another round of High Tea Mystique, and honestly, such a great one because I feel like this is just another step in the evolution process. And as much as like such joy and such conversation has come about this season, I feel it's especially appropriate that we look back and we have our, what I love to call our rewind episode, right? You know you're nearing the end whenever an anime, a sitcom has their flashback episode. And this is that for us. So welcome to High Tea Mystique's flashback episode. Yay.
We're gonna be like Raven Simone having visions.
Yes.
And before we get into our flashbacks and our content, I would just love to introduce our tea. And if I'm not mistaken, we're gonna have Kat talk a little bit about our tea.
Yes, but it's actually not next to me. So I have to go and grab it because it's still on the counter. So never before happened
Pause.
on High Tea Mystique, but I will be back in 30 seconds.
Stepping away. Stepping away. You see, this is what I'm talking about. This is the viewer experience.
I
You were just
wonder
listening to us.
what tea it's gonna be. I hear her pouring it.
No
Pour one
way,
out for
can
the
you really?
homies.
You can hear me, but you can't see me. John Cena.
Ooh.
So I won't be able to drink it for a few minutes because I just poured the water onto it. But this is a concoction because I was in the mood for, I guess, just two specific ingredients. Well, there's a flair to it, but I was in the mood for two specific ingredients because I'm currently going through some shin splints on my left leg. So it's just super inflamed and swollen. So I'm trying to get all of, like anything I can, right? Anything that I take in, I want it to be helpful towards my body. So ginger. And then I mixed it with an elderberry tea that I featured here before because I got it when I was in Washington because we were like out on the trails and there were a bunch of natural elderberries. And so we had to like buy a little tea before we left. But I thought it was a really neat mixture of like blending a spice with the berry, and it does seem festive, for this time of year too. So I also added some chai spice, so like a blend of cinnamon and nutmeg. Yeah, really, really excited to try it because I haven't tried it with the added spice to it. And you ladies?
And we're actually, funny enough, so I am actually really sipping on some kombucha today.
Hey.
So I had some kombucha, some passion fruit, flavored kombucha, and this was honestly just a little treat for myself, because it was actually something that I bought, leaving a store, and I think kombucha is such a great. I love to think of it as like start. I love to think of it as end of the day drink, but Kat's actually the one that got me doing it, at beginning and end, because of the whole kind of replacement for caffeine we talked about like way back when. But I loved drinking it at the end of the night because I feel like it kind of settles, all the digesting that my stomach is probably gone through, and especially before bed. So, kombucha, ladies and gentlemen, kombucha.
And I am drinking good old H2O because we are in the middle of a move. And I cannot access any of my teas right now. However, fun fact, we did try, at least for you listeners, we attempted this recording last time, and something that had never happened before was that somehow, even though we were all in different spaces, we each gravitated towards the same tea, which was an elderberry ginger. So I feel like I wanted to just pay homage to that moment because it was so great, Obviously, Friday the 13th, technical difficulties. That's when we tried to record it. Things happen. We adapt. We pivot. But that was the last tea we were drinking. So I'm going to drink my water and pretend it's that delicious ginger elderberry.
It was a good tea. Really good tea for immunity.
Yes.
Yes, and I'm excited to have it again, but with that added flair. So let's see.
Very seasonal flair.
Two
So I
more
like
minutes and
it.
I'll try it. Hmm?
Very seasonal flair.
Very seasonal, right? I mean, already though, like I said, that spiced berry is very seasonal. It's giving cranberry sauce.
With
Mm,
elderberry.
exactly. Oh, elderberry sauce. Ooh, might have to try that. Might have to add that to the recipe.
Mm-hmm.
I've added citrus before, like orange, mandarin, I think it was. It was good. So I'm sure elderberry would also be delicious.
That almost makes me want to try an elderberry wine.
Mm. Well,
Right.
down in the Redlands here in Florida, we have the Schnebley's winery vineyard, and they
Mm-hmm.
make wines out of all of the different fruits. Maybe they have one.
We make a mulled
Yeah.
version of it for the holidays.
Ooh, that sounds good too. Oh, so many to explore. What are we
I
gonna
know.
do for our last episode?
We expand beyond tea and just do brew.
What a way to celebrate. Just bring out the
Herbal
coquito.
concoctions.
Apothecaries everywhere.
Hmm.
So now that we have kind of settled, even though we're obviously getting excited about new teas, I definitely want to start us off on kind of a rewind, right? So I'm going to bring you ladies back to April of this year, 2024. We released an episode called Mindful Moments Midpoint Check-in. You guys remember what I'm talking about here?
I do.
Oh
This
yeah,
was our
it's coming back.
first episode of this season. We recorded it maybe a couple of weeks before we released it. So maybe it was end of March towards the beginning of April. And this episode brought up so many wonderful points that, funny enough, I feel like some of us have definitely progressed. Some of us definitely are still talking about. Some of us are still molding the idea in our heads. So I'm just really excited to get into kind of a check-in into, what we were setting our goals for each other back in April and how we feel we've met those goals for 2024 now that we're in December. So first, let's start off with probably one of my I guess one of the things that, I'm so happy about for, Pam here is, back in April, she had submitted her last assignment, right, for her master's. She graduated, she walked the stage, she's definitely got that pay bump for work. How are we feeling now? You're out, you're in the wild, no more classroom. What's going on?
I genuinely feel like I'm lost in limbo and have PTSD of potentially missing some assignment that I forgot. It's funny because I feel like the same thing happened to me when I graduated with my bachelor's. I, for whatever reason, had nightmares that there was a whole online class that it just completely slipped my mind. And I didn't turn anything in. And all of a sudden, it was like the end of the term. And I see that I'm getting obviously a failing grade. I don't know why I wasn't dropped in that dream, but I just failed the class and I couldn't graduate. And I almost feel now that that time of my life was so busy. And I remember that in the moment, right, I felt like I had a lot to do and that I was doing a lot, but also felt, I don't remember if I mentioned it in that episode, but I feel like I did mention it in episodes after, where I just felt stagnant. Like I felt stuck, even though I was working towards something that a lot of people would consider to be, I don't even know what the right word is, but I guess like a huge milestone. Um, in the moment, I remember thinking, I feel like I'm running in place, like in those dreams where I'm putting in so much effort, but I'm getting nowhere. And now that I'm done, I remember that I mentioned in a different episode that I was kind of suffering from this idea of imposter syndrome, where even though I know I did well in the classroom, I still didn't feel confident enough to kind of apply that in the workplace. But now I think that, so that was maybe 8 months ago, which is also crazy to think about because I feel like the Masters felt like a lifetime ago. I could have sworn it was already a whole year that had passed. And when Tess mentioned that it was in April, I was like, are you serious? That was this year? Which makes sense, but it feels so long ago. And so sitting here now, end of the year, and I love that we're doing this check-in again because I think this is such an important practice for anybody to do, right? To be able to have any kind of growth. Uh it's interesting to see how my perspective on that has changed, right? I feel like I have a little bit less of that imposter syndrome now, where I feel reassured and can feel that I can apply the things that I know. And I think that's also attributed to the fact that the people around me who supported me and understood what journey I was on acknowledged the fact that I did complete something big, and now they're offering me these opportunities, right? Like at work, they're offering me opportunities to be able to apply what I'm learning. Um, and I think those moments really allow me that time to sit back and think, I can do this, like this is how this applies to real life. Which is interesting in itself because the concept of real world application is something that I did learn in the class, but I feel like it's so different, right? Like when you actually see it in practice in your life, you almost, at least for me, it feels, the best way that I can describe it is what I assume what people describe when they say that they're lucid dream, right? Or like an out of body experience where I feel like things are happening, but it feels so surreal that I can't believe it's me, the person doing it, and almost feels that I'm watching myself. Um, but I think that now, as I'm being able to practice what I've learned more and more, and even now talking about it, right, and thinking, wow, that was 8 months ago, that was still only this year, it's kind of a weird, proud moment. And it feels very similar to when I left Japan, where this was such a huge thing. I feel like we build things up to be so big, and then it happens, and then you go through them, and it's so exciting in the moment. But then afterwards, you're like, oh, okay, now what? You know? And I feel like I'm slowly transitioning out of that now what stage. But yeah, that's where I'm at.
It's good to hear myself in those responses too, because those are things that I feel like, Kat, I feel like both of us have kind of revisited those feelings in different ways, you know,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
it's,
And it goes back to what we were talking about at the very top before we like officially, our pre-chat about the season, and that rush that you have felt pretty much this entire year,
Mm-hmm.
that we know the majority of people are feeling right now. And so I think a lot of people can empathize with you there, that it's in these moments, like these wild chapters of our lives where you're like being thrust into newness all around you. It's exciting, but it's hard to see in the moment.
Yeah, it also gives me an appreciation for that concept of being present, right? Because things and experiences, we go through them so quickly, like faster than we even realize a lot of the time. And
Yeah.
I think it's something that helps ground me when I take that moment, like now, like what we're doing now, to think back and acknowledge, right, all of the things that we have done and notice the differences and the changes of how we felt then versus how we feel now after having gone through those experiences.
I think that's such an important thing to look back on for this time is I don't know where we were in April, right? But there are that kind of trifold effect of like pre, during, and post, right? Um, one one other thing that I wanted to ask Pam, because she kind of touched on this, is there was that kind of feeling of being a master as far as the subject in a classroom setting, but not feeling like a master in application at work, right? Forgive me if you did say this, but have you felt more of a master now? Right? You are the master. I mean, let's with feelings aside, you are the master, right? But has there been a time where you're like, okay, I feel it now. It's coming through, or it's echoing. The effects are being felt now in my position, or when you did something, right? Have you kind of felt that maybe the quote unquote imposter syndrome kind of pull back a bit? Has that masterful moment come into your grip?
I mean, I kind of mentioned it earlier with the idea that that feeling is kind of going away, right? With some of the opportunities that I'm being given now at work. But I still believe that because of the kind of person and that I am and the personality that I have, that'll never be something that truly comes away from me because I don't believe in bragging and boasting about knowledge that I know. You know, one of my biggest pet peeves are when people are so egotistical and narcissistic and have this need to want to display, you know, oh, look at how much I know. I think humility is something that a lot of people need to practice. And I do acknowledge the value in receiving, what's the word? Recognition, right? And achievements. But I think it's different when you're going around and parading it and like wanting everybody to see that, because I view that as a weakness, right? Like I see that as somebody who's trying to mask some sort of insecurity that they have. And not to say that doesn't mean I'm not insecure about things, but because I'm somebody who tends to lean to be more humble, and I try to remind myself that, you know, just because you've achieved a master's doesn't mean you know everything, right? Or it doesn't mean, like, who's to say that the person that I'm talking to might not know what I know, right? They very well could. I also think that the experiences that I've gone through have helped me realize the reality, right, of what people actually know, especially because I think there's a lot of things in this life that we easily perceive as something that is finite, right? Like there's so many things now where people are say like you like you're seeing on the news that there's recalls, or they've allowed certain chemicals to pass through and people thought things were safe, and in reality they're not, right? In the things that we're consuming, and there's this thing of microplastics everywhere, and people like you assume that the world operates with humanity's best interest, right? And that certain things would be put in place because it makes sense. And as I've gotten older, and I don't think this is anything that's related particularly to my field, but I feel just as a person and growing and understanding the reality of how the world works, I'm learning that there are gaps, right? That the world is not exactly the way that it has been advertised my entire childhood, right? That there are cracks in the adulthood and in the adults that are running, even in official places. And so I think that that's something that's helping me with that imposter syndrome, right? Acknowledging that I do have something to contribute because this world that we live in isn't perfect, you know, and that, for example, like because I work in education and I work with helping teachers and professors, I assumed that all professors would receive the same training. And that could be true maybe on the lower levels, like kindergarten through 12th grade. But I had to learn the hard way that in higher education, really all you have to know is the content. You don't really have to know how to teach. And so those are certain things that I've tried to be very careful, right? And taking the more humble route to make sure I don't overstep on anybody. Um, but I've had to learn that no, the reality is that the only thing that you need to be able to teach in higher education is a degree higher than the level that you're teaching, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you know all of the techniques to be able to relay that information well enough so that your students can absorb it and actually learn it. And so breaking, I guess, those rose-colored glasses has helped me a little bit, right? And empowers me in a way where, okay, yeah, even if this world is broken and it's not as perfect as I thought it was, that doesn't mean it doesn't have to stay that. It has to stay that way, right? Like I could do something about it.
I think what you said, especially about assuming that everybody has the best intentions and, is looking out is definitely a hard reality that I feel. I know that you said it on a very industrial level, which is very true, right? We think that, things have been checked and double checked and triple checked, right, for our goodness and our health and our society, but they really haven't, right? We have such a reactive society. We don't really have a preventative, you know, um, way of being, right? Especially in the United States. Like our healthcare is very reactive, right? We don't have a preventative healthcare system. We don't have healthcare coverage that will, give you, specialists until, right, they find something to like justify the specialist appointment, right? So it's a sad thing, but it kind of, like you're saying, wakes you up, right? To not believe that, okay, if they're not looking out, then I have to do it, right? It's not that there's always going to be this gap. It's that you're filling a gap, for sure. I think one of my favorite things that happened in that episode was you kind of questioning, right? Like, am I the master? And I feel like you're, in a way, you're almost saying there is no such thing as a master, right? In a funny way. Whereas you assume the role, but only because I don't think there's a sort of end. It just, the role needs to continue, right? The job needs to go on.
I also think it's something would be naive of me to believe that I am a master with only 2 years, right, of truly studying, let's say, the craft, when everywhere else, right, if we look at more hands-on sorts of learning or crafts specific learning, they say it takes 10 years to master something. So I feel like that's also a huge reason why I even when I heard you guys say, like, no, you are a master, I would be like, oh, I don't know about that. Like, I did a few assignments, I got what it was, but I don't know if I'm truly a master. And I think that feeling, I'm hoping, will come if and when I pursue the PhD.
We have just a lot of confidence in you, Pam. Sorry.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. But I think where you're coming from is such a place of being honed in to your power. I think coming from the approach of humility is the most powerful way to lead. I think it's why we respect, why we respect the figures who have lived on beyond their time, right? Like any elders that, are household names, Mother Teresa, uh, Buddha, Jesus, like the things that they had in common was that they would say, like, don't call me anything more than a man, or than a human being, because my power comes in, like in what I have learned. All of these things I have learned, and I make the effort to continue learning. And so when you're always a student, it never feels like you're a teacher. It's more like you're just sharing, I think, as you go and as you grow and experience. So we're just speaking, like, I guess, technically, and I think it's really cool to see you living in the space, of what the practice of being a master is.
And speaking of, right, the kind of, I don't want to say the masters, right, because we're trying to undo that label. But we are speaking about a lot of reflection, a lot of learning, and I want to jump to Kat, right? And I feel like in April, Kat was definitely, sitting under a tree and meditating and definitely thinking because she came out with, I think, one of the quotes that I wrote down, like, taking notes to talk about with you all for this episode, my favorite quote. And I'm going to bring it up to you, Kat. Talk less shit and do more shit. Yeah. Should I mean,
Mic drop.
a mic drop, right? Yeah.
Boom.
talk less shit and do more shit. This was one of your affirmations. This was one of your goals, kind of at the same time, right? I think your whole drive around this concept was definitely set up around this. What you mentioned was like a season of solitude, right? In this episode, you were kind of really enjoying not just, being occupied, right? You were enjoying being, in solitude. You were enjoying being, at home, invested in kind of your base, and not just like an environment, but in people, right? Your base in people, right? In JP. And I think it was a wonderful kind of moment right under the tree, right? That's why, because you brought up Buddha. And it was, I mean, and even hearing you, right? It was a lot of reflection on who you're looking up, or who you're looking at, who you're looking up to, and who you're looking down on, right? A lot of ideas of, judgment and how we pass that on. It was really interesting, right? And one thing you also said about is like that you quoted actually somebody else, is not judging people who do less than you, but judging people who do more than you, right? So very interesting kind of river stream of thoughts coming from Kat in that episode. Kat from April, 8 months ago, right? Now,
Spring cat.
I know, spring Kat. My question, I feel, is first and foremost, do you feel like you talk less shit?
Yeah, I think it's like a scary question to come back to. I think that's probably a reason why a lot of people have that almost hesitation to create New Year's resolutions, because you're afraid that when you come back to it, you haven't changed at all. And what was the point? Because time is relative. And so why would I, like giving yourself a deadline to do something that could ultimately take years to really embody, and just be a part of you. However, I would say that this decision that I made was because I remember this time, I remember this season, and I remember that my energy was really changing. I think I was really changing as a person in a lot of incredible ways. I think ways that inspired more self-worth, an understanding of that, yes, growth is not linear, but in that way, the possibilities, you are limitless, and I think getting into that space meant that I was very impassioned. And so being impassioned in conversations with energies that, you know they weren't there to serve me, meant that I was putting myself in spaces, like I was getting very vulnerable, like with my words and my feelings. And I just wanted to stop that. So I wanted to talk less shit and do more shit. And I think I really did. I think just like Pam, I think I was in the whirlpool, and just going with the flow and trying to make the best decision as I went along. So never really taking a moment to reflect and see that I was doing that. But it's incredible to come back to this, and reflect, and also just like Pam, see that this was the better part of 7 months ago. And I do feel like, I think meditation is something that I try to practice, but I always struggle with the idea of what a successful meditation not only feels like, but does for you. Like where do those effects go and how do they like play into the spirit? And I'm starting to recognize that meditation is not just setting aside, like I don't think it's for me, I'm realizing that it's not the conventional idea of meditation, right? Of sitting in a space quietly and trying to think about nothing. I think it's realizing that in life, you can choose to rest your mind at any time. And I think that my like desire, to just keep the chatter going and like keep the thoughts rolling and keep moving and going and going and going and you know, and being inspired by new topics, which is ultimately how these things happen, right? Because I don't think that it's that, maybe what's the word, statistically, maybe right now I still talk the same amount of shit that I did before, but I'm not talking as much. You know, like I'm not engaging with my thoughts as much. I'm really trying to just let things pass through, you know, and not linger so much, and really try to identify with my shaman, Don Miguel Ruiz, who says don't take anything personally, you know, which is just a matter of that, you know, how much intention do I put into the menial tasks in my day, right? I shouldn't assume that anyone else is doing the same. And so what is it in my business to be making business of somebody else's business? And in that way, I think there's been a lot of growth. You know, I think that it's been nice. I always had this fear that sometimes my relationships and friendships with people were based on like more on conversation and discussion about things than experiences that we created together. And I feel like this has really been a season of the exact opposite of that fear, you know, of having just tons of experiences with people and creating many memories, but also having a lot of time with myself, you know, and to be in solitude, be in silence, doing a lot of reflecting, right? We're in our 30s. So it's just around that time where deeper thoughts are creeping in, right? And I'm becoming more towards the halfway point than the beginning. And so it's given me a lot to be grateful for. And I think when you're really grateful, you don't want to spoil your own energy, you know, because once it's spoiled, I'm also recognizing that it's a lot harder to come out of being sad as I get older. You know, I think because it takes longer to get there, because I'm so used to fighting off that feeling, that when I have bouts of grief or depression, they feel more and more eternal every time. So I think it's so powerful to just try to take a step, you know, towards what you want to be, because even if you can't see it right then and there, you are doing it. You're doing the work.
I have a curiosity, which is also a partial observation. I'm wondering, because I feel like, especially in our first season, right? I feel like I heard you speak a lot about this fear of being liked by people, right? And this necessity to be perceived in a specific way. And I feel like I'm noticing more and more that that is becoming less of a priority for you. And so I'm wondering if part of you feeling that you are, like, you know, you said statistically you probably are talking the same amount, but that really mentally it's something that you're almost learning to make peace with, right? And so I'm wondering if you feel that those two things coincide, that the reason why you feel that you are talking less shit and doing more shit is that you're kind of letting go of this. I don't know if it was a need, but this feeling that you needed so much approval from, even from people who maybe were not the best energies for you to try and, you know, obtain.
Absolutely. It definitely was a need. I would say it still is a need when I'm in situations that bring me, you know, anxiety, or have high stakes. And I feel like you, when you were speaking, Pam, you were talking like about this idea of being a master and feeling like it's something. You made me think about the idea of stepping into something, but not by choice, right? By being called. And it made me think of a quote from William Shakespeare. And the quote, the line from Twelfth Night, the play, looking at you, Tess, is some are born great, some achieve greatness, and some have greatness thrust upon them. And I think that we have to recognize the duality of life, which is that with great things comes great pain. And it's out of a lot of really shitty situations that we end up finding a lot of growth, right? Or maybe not shitty situations, but high stress, high anxiety, high stakes, and things
Definitely
that we just have
situations
to,
we didn't choose to be in.
yeah, exactly, that they were thrust upon us, and we ended up making the best decision, like because it led us to where we are now. And I think that this last year has had the most of that I've ever experienced. Some really wild opportunities came my way and I said yes to them. And while I made some choices that I don't regret any of the choices, but I wish maybe the timing, there was just some really stressful months where I was just doing a lot at once. But it's because what I was doing it felt like an opportunity that I could not refuse, and so what I learned about myself through that was priceless. And how strong I am, how resilient I can be as long as I'm doing something that I love. And so I think the turmoil came from realizing that there were some things that I was doing that I did not love, and they put me in a place where I felt like I was losing to what I really wanted to be doing, which is creating experiences for people and performing, providing not an escape, but a form of escapism, kind of mirroring your world back to you. And I think the do more shit is also happening because there are a lot of things that are manifesting right now, that are coming into fruition, and that just take months of planning. But the fact that those ideas have sparked this year is also really, really crazy. So to be able to look back and see what you can write down on paper and then know that there are already good things coming on the way is something that I need to take a step back and appreciate too. Because in the moment, again, it's like, I wish this was happening already. Like we can all relate to this because this is our podcast. I was just talking to someone about how we're wrapping up our second season and how it was almost a year of pre-planning before we launched our first season, for reasons that were expected and reasons that were unbeknownst to us at the time, because we had to live through them. So still in that space. I don't think that space will ever go away. I think it's just the route of success. You're always moving on to the next thing. And it's a good thought to reflect on. It's really cool to see that I have grown in that space. Still have more to do, of course. I'm just a girl. We're doing our best every day. But I definitely think I've gotten better.
I definitely, and who am I to say anything, right? But I think when I heard you say that line, listening back to our first episode this season, I laughed to myself because I feel like this was definitely executed. I was like, I feel like this is what we have revisited so many times, and for good reason, right? And not because we're not because we're directly addressing this issue, but it's just kind of where our nature is going now, right? And I think this motivation was a big driving force to that, right? We're not so focused on I guess what standard, right, are we putting onto others, right? We're more focused on, I think now, what works for ourselves and what doesn't, and the rest is just for everyone else to figure out, right? I feel like one thing that I really stuck to piggyback off of what the kind of season that and change and this character kind of birth, right, that, or not character birth, but birth of a new state of cat, right? One question that I really wanted to ask, because you had mentioned it in this episode, is that your personality is one that attracts outsiders, right? You had said that in the episode, and that, this was something that, not necessarily negative, but something that you're noticing, that you were kind of paying closer attention to back in April. And when I listened to that line, I feel like it was Kat in April 2024, but this is Tess of December 2024. I feel like I noticed that too, right? Like I also attract a lot of outsiders, mainly because, I think I just have the patience, and I have maybe too much patience, and I have maybe too much, right, kindness and understanding. But I feel that was a spirit, right, that I could be completely honest about myself and say that is who I am, but that's not necessarily what I want 100% of the time, right? And Kat, I'm just wondering, like, how has that morphed for you, right? The attracting outsiders. Do you see it in a new light? Have you seen something new from that?
Uh, New, no, but I think that in the process of growth, I think I realized that there is a way to reach people, and offer yourself to people without losing anything, and I think that I am somebody who with my people, I'm so one-on-one, intentional time. I want to just, get to the juicy details of your life and what is happening with you, and so can I easily do that with somebody that I am just getting to know as well? Yes, because it's my preference, but I no longer have that much energy to give. So I think something that has made it really manageable for me is becoming an event leader and organizer, and creating spaces where I can have an impact on people and still share myself with people. But it's almost like there is a timestamp, that protects me and protects my energy at at uh at no expense. And so I love that. I love that I found this, and it feels so fulfilling at the same time. And if anything, it makes me feel like sometimes I have a little bit more that I can give, in case sometimes people will message you, privately on the side. But one thing I'll say is I take my time, and uh, I don't feel like that all the time. And I'm recognizing that people can feel your energy. And so as long as I stay honest with how I'm feeling in that present moment, uh, I shouldn't have any regret, because I think that I'm not a perfect person. I don't think I'm on like, I don't, like on like, I don't think I'm my best self 100% of the time. Like, don't catch me at a gas station when I'm running late for work, kind of thing. But I do think that the energy that I give off to somebody, if I may be wary of getting too close to them, or recognizing that their energy may not be what I look for, in a person or a friend, uh, I think they just feel it, without anything malicious, just recognizing. And I think that there was a time when I would match the energy, regardless of, like, I wouldn't think past that. I just wanted to match your vibe. I just wanted to match your energy. I wanted to make it an easy experience for you, because for me, it didn't feel hard to do that. And now I recognize, like, it was hard. It is hard because you're not being yourself, and you're morphing into something else. And then the only person who's like really losing anything is you. So for sure, for sure, for sure. And I think it's really interesting that you're going through that now.
Yeah, I think especially which is what we were talking about at the beginning, right? When you have so too much priority and much less time. You're like, oh, these flags in the grass are becoming very obvious.
Mm.
Very obvious. I think one of the beautiful things about reflection is noticing that things, paths and journeys and goals and intentions have curves and U-turns and reroutes. And even thinking as to where I was in April of 2024, I thought I mastered this, right? I thought I was done. I knew this. I ended it. But of course, like we said, there is no such thing as a master. I'm, revisiting, things that are actually right, like what you're saying, actually kind of pulling me places where I'm like, oh, that's not what I intended, right? I actually want to merge back here, right? And then it becomes obvious, oh, why did this happen? Oh, okay, yeah. And then you see patterns. So I think for sure this is not just an observation, but it's kind of an alert, which, who knows, right? If this is what happened to Kat, right, in April 2024, but a kind of um awakening of a new routine, right? Like, this isn't to say that, you all of a sudden have to change yourself, but okay, no, I have to put things in place for me to protect myself. Yeah. And being a community leader, I think is great because one, that is a timestamp, and it's also a directive, right? Like, everybody's there for directive above all else. So definitely keeps things focused, right? And not merging into sidelines and paths, right, that you never intended to go on. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think this first episode was such a kind of a raising a flag for all of us, right? A raising a sign, raising an awareness, raising um a new protest to, like, one, what we are looking forward to and what we are accepting of and what we will not accept. And speaking of all those standards, right? One thing that we did promise ourselves and that we fulfilled, right, for Pam's sake, is to choose a word for ourselves. We decided to choose one word to kind of wrap up our 2024 theme, right? Or goal, I should say, because who knew, right, what our theme would be. Now we know what our theme is, but in April, this was definitely a goal. And funny enough, Pam, when she prompted us to this, even in this episode, said we should look back on this. And here we are. We're doing it, Pam. We're looking back. And I just want to remind everybody of their word and ask you all, right? Do you feel like this word was fulfilled? Do you think it came to life in your 2024 journey? Tell us a little bit about it, right? How did it come to life? How did it come to empower you? And just for a reminder, Pam's word was dream. Kat's word was innovation. And my word was advocacy. And I guess I'll start off with my word, because if there's one thing that I'm proud of, it's that I felt 100% that advocacy was fulfilled for 2024. I think this was the year to recognize where my needs were, where my needs were not met, right? And where I'm, needing to provide more for myself. I'm still a student, I'm still a full-time worker, and I'm still, of course, needing all of the human necessities and wanting to fulfill all of the human plans. And I think that, it can be easy to flush yourself right down with all the other chaos. But I think this year I made it a priority to look after me. And I'm very happy to say that, you know, a big thing that I talked about in episode 1, right, of this season was health, right? And wanting to align myself and take better care of myself. And, you know, I went through my first ever surgery successfully. And it took a long time of advocating and doing the big pant things and calling insurances and talking to doctors, but it got done. And I feel so great about that. You know, sticking to a routine, getting in touch with, you know, a mental health specialist. And quite frankly, I think it's been such a successful journey, not just from my own perspective, but even hearing, you know, my therapist's feedback on my end of the year session and just talking about what has even happened, you know, in our sessions, and her even saying, you know, I feel like you didn't even need this session today. So that was a big goal, right? That she's like, you know, you're doing it, you're doing the work. Advocacy, you know, I feel like this was the year to listen to people speak out for themselves, go to a lot of concerts, hear people screaming, enjoying music, enjoy people saying exactly what they need to say, and also in turn doing the same thing. So I, for one, feel very good about my word. Feel like I've definitely lived it. I hope to continue living it, even if it's not my word for 2025. Yeah, for sure. And we have dream and we have innovation.
Yes. But before we do talk about those, I just want to comment on watching you this past year really take this word by the horns, you know, and I think you specifically are interesting because I think that while you chose this word for our episode in April, I think you were already practicing it, you know, I think from the beginning of the year, you know, with just setting your main goals. And it's been really neat to see because it hasn't been an easy year. You know, I think that it's like an unfortunate thing, right? Life, because things you can plan to the T, you know, and it can seem so easy and you can do all of the research to still be really 2 steps behind, you know, and I feel like that happened to you at points this year on this journey. And you had to come to that like crossroads multiple times of like, am I gonna just give up? Because technically giving up would keep me where I'm at, right? And I know what that feels like. So technically I can do it. Or am I gonna keep going even though it's obviously harder, right? There's obviously more steps than I thought. This is tougher than I thought, and nothing else about my life has changed. So you had the choice, right, to dwell on one or the other. And every single time you still chose to advance and move forward and make the tough decision and take the hard route. And this is why you do it, you know, like to be the person that you know that you are inside and like get to see her come to life. And I definitely see that in you, you know, and I think this is obviously just the beginning, you know, which means that, yeah, things are going to be probably tough, you know, as we continue like trekking on this journey, uh, but only for the greater good. And it's a beautiful journey. It's yours. I think it's
Yeah.
awesome. You're a lot to be proud of.
Yeah. Thank you, Kat. I have loved it. I have loved it. I have cried on it. I have been angry at it, but like any close and personal relationship, it comes with all that. So yeah, I definitely loved it.
I feel like too. I've I s- I've seen the shift even in you, right, from our first season to the midpoint check-in till now, where the way in which before how like the shift in how you view yourself has been so prominent in your change and in your growth. And as your friend, right, it makes me so happy to see how much you're willing to stand up for yourself and advocate for yourself and shift that mindset from where you were before to where you are at now, right? Where before you would almost attack inward. Now you're putting posts up and attacking outward, and making sure that you're in a good place. And I feel like that is something that is a huge accomplishment, and it deserves such a huge round of applause because it's something that takes a lot of hard work. And I'm so happy to hear that your therapist helped you see that too. Like you didn't even need me today when you had that session. So I think that's such a beautiful thing to see. And there was something that you both said where it's like you could plan as much as you can, right? I guess I'll go next with my word, where you can plan as much as you can and just life is the way that it is. And I remember when I was picking the word dream, I believe that when I was talking about it in the episode, I had mentioned that my previous words before, when I was coming back from Japan, it was routine, right? Because it was coming back from a different country, trying to settle myself in to a place that felt strange but was still home. And then I think my word after that was similar to routine, but it expanded a little bit more. I don't remember exactly what it was now. And then I decided to just dream, right? Because I feel like I'm somebody, like the purpose of me picking that word is because I am someone who plans way too far ahead, especially when life is the way that it is and the universe will laugh at you and say, you thought that's what was going to happen? That's not what we have in plan for you. And so part of me choosing the word dream was to kind of allow myself to be in the flow of energy of what could be possible, right? And not limit myself to what I thought I could achieve based on the goals that I set out. And that might sound a little bit contradictory to some of the things that we've said before, right? With some of our episodes of setting goals. And it's important to have long-term goals, but I also think it's important to be open-minded and have moments in life where you say, fuck it, let's just see what happens. Like, why not? Why not try this? Why not do that and live a life without regrets? And I feel that although I had set that word with a specific goal and intention in mind, which was to hopefully live with my partner, my significant other, even though I haven't gotten to that point, I still feel like I have taken huge steps for myself in the direction of fuck it, let's see what happens and overcome. I don't want to say that they were fears, but they were definitely limiting beliefs that I had that I self-imposed, right? Because moving out has been such a huge goal of mine since coming back from Japan. Because imagine being on your own and then having to move back in with your parents and feeling stuck, right? And I knew that was such a huge reason for me feeling this stagnant energy. But I also knew the reality of what it is to try and live on your own in Miami. Like it's nearly impossible unless you're going to rent a shitty ass efficiency or unless you have a roommate. And that was always something that it was such a hard toss up for me because the forward planning 5-year down the line planning person that I am is thinking, why waste money on somebody else's rent when I could use that on my own mortgage? And then the reality of that is the time that it takes to save up for a down payment, the time that it takes to do that by myself, the reality of wanting to do that while balancing trying to have this long distance relationship and all these other things, right? And thinking about potentially doing a doctorate program. And so I feel like I'm very good at pursuing those long term goals where I am just absorbed with work and I'm so far deep in the trenches that I know that the end will be there and I just have to go through it. But I've never taken the route of let's follow this other path outside of these trenches and see let's just see where this pasture leads, right? And so I think especially towards the end of the year, especially when it's come to certain personal events that were happening in my life at the end of the year, I very much took the opportunity of, you know what, I'm just gonna let it go. If it's something that I need to say or I want to try and plan, right? We'll sow the seed, but we're not gonna force it to grow at the speed that I want it to grow and at the rate that I want it to go or at the rate that the package on the back of the seed packet said it would, right? We put it there and we see what happens. And I think especially, being in a long distance relationship with somebody who, when you're trying to bring someone over to the US, that's always such a complication, potentially will become even more complicated now, was something that was a huge dream killer, you know? But I think even though it wasn't exactly the dream that I thought, I was still able to, towards the end of the year, kind of say, fuck it, let's just see what happens. I know that where I'm at is not a place that I am okay, right? I'm not truly happy. And that doesn't mean this dream is gone, but the common theme between that dream and what I've been wanting for a while is to just be on my own. And we can still do that. And it may not be in the way that you thought it was, but it's still achieving your dream, right? And it's still achieving part of that dream. And it's leading towards the bigger part of the dream. And the best dreams that you have when you're sleeping are always the ones that feel the longest and have these huge roller coaster shit going on and things changing so quickly. And so I feel that I have kind of leaned into that word, even though it wasn't exactly the way that I had planned it when intended and said that word. I still feel that there are ways that I've been able to make that, manifest for myself. And it's really nice to see that how, if anything, I think it's nice to feel and understand and process that we really can shape our own reality. You know what I mean? That I feel that so much of the time we are fighting ourselves and this mental barrier of thinking of all of the reasons why we shouldn't, right? Or thinking of all of the problems that could come along the way, or thinking about, and Kat has mentioned this before, right? When you get stuck in that planning phase and it feels so good, but then you never end up doing the thing. And I feel like these recent experiences within this very last month of the year has just shown me how quick, maybe not easy, but how quick you can make a change in your life, and how much of it is not really that big of a deal as you make it seem in your head, and that as much and I feel like we even felt this with the podcast when we were prepping for it. And then just once you do it and then you keep doing it, you feel, oh shit, that wasn't as bad as I thought, or this is easier than I thought, or damn, I'm actually here doing the thing. So I feel like that feeling is something that I'm really glad I feel I'm embodying now a little bit more. And I want to continue growing that part of myself going into 2025.
I think
Yeah.
something that even, I mean, I feel I don't know how many times I counted the people that told us, just publish, just do it, just release it.
Yeah. Double digits for sure.
Double digits.
Yes.
Just do it. Just try it out. Just make the mistakes. You'll fix them.
Nike knows what they're talking about. Not sponsored.
It's just so hard to see from the inside. It's so
Yeah.
hard to see. And I think I love what you shared, Pam, and I think it's gonna resonate with a lot of the people listening to this episode, right? That idea of recognizing that dreams can come true even if they're fragmented pieces.
Yeah.
Like you're chiseling away at the ultimate dream, and you don't know which part is going to come first. And I guess that's the exciting part.
And I feel like the perfect analogy to this, right, is Shark Boy and Lava Girl. Like the way that you can shape your reality is the same way that that little boy, I forget the character's name, right, the kid who dreams up this world, but the way that he's just like, okay, I'm just gonna dream of this, and it appears. That's kind of the energy, right? That manifestation of and that full understanding of, damn, I really can make what I want happen, and it can be that quick, and it can be that, it can be that painless, because and that is a word that I want to use, because in our mind, or at least in my mind, I feel like I make it up to be such a painful process, right? So arduous. It's one of the things that I have crippling anxiety about is a lot of the adulting things, right? Oh my God, taxes. Oh my God, all this other stuff. Oh my God, whatever. And then the reality is it's not that big of a deal. Like there's something out there that can show you how to do it. You just follow it step by step, or you just figure it out, and you realize something else is there to guide you. And poof, all of a sudden, just like Sharp Boy and Lumber Girl, that boat comes in out of nowhere, and you can ride down whatever that river was called. Um, but
It's
yeah.
so true though. It really do be like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it is an amazing analogy because it's very in line with our podcast, right? We speak about mysticism and the powers that we harness, and the powers that are inside of us. And when you think about that, we are all superhuman because when you are constantly putting your energy where you want it to go, you are using your superpower. Like you are manipulating energy in your favor, but it takes a lot of energy. So in the same way that a superhero, right, will lose charge and has to find their own way to bring them back, we have to do that too.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's that ebb and flow, because I'm sure that we've all experienced burnout on the road to a dream,
Mm-hmm.
right? You ladies might be fresh off of it, right? You just completed your move.
Mm-hmm.
It's a huge every step towards our goal is the last step is always the hardest,
Yeah.
so
And that move is even a perfect analogy too, because it feels like you do so much and it feels like you haven't even made a dent. But the reality is you
mm,
have made a dent. It's just really hard to see where you're at right now.
yeah. Yeah, oh my gosh, the last like 4 hours of moving out are crazy because you're like, "What is all of this stuff?" Like, I have sectioned off every single area of my house. Like, why are there things like I don't this isn't for the bathroom, this isn't for the garage, this isn't for the laundry, like, where is this? What is this item? Like you just things just find their way out, and that is so accurate to life too.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you think you've got all the pieces.
I liked how you put it too, Kat, as like just because it's a fragment doesn't mean it isn't coming true. Like, because I mean, there's something that in all this vent about the complications and the phone calls and the conversations of like battling and the amount of people you have to talk to get this stuff done. That is quite honestly what you really mean when you say like this is a fragment of the dream coming true. Because sure, this isn't the vision, but these are the exact same things you will have to go through to make the vision come true, you know? So this
Mhm.
was phase one. You will
Mhm.
have to continue having conversations. You have to continue knowing who to call when this is in need, like who to reach out to, how to have like how to be persistent in like needing and demanding something. It's like, yeah, it's so tiring, but I think it feels especially tiring because it's fresh off of like, the second or third time I've had to do it, right? But if it's the sixth or the seventh or the 10th, at that point it becomes a little bit more like second nature.
Yeah. Well, and at that point, you're closer to the end,
Hmm.
So I think the gravitational pull is taking you like you've worked so hard, you've gotten so close, you know.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And speaking of our last word, Kat, innovation. How are we feeling
Mhm.
about that word?
Good. I love that I chose that word, and it's cool to see how many things surprised me this year. For example, the feature film that I did, I don't know if maybe I was doing it this summer. We were in pre-recording phases for our podcast. It came out not too long ago, and with the promise of another one next year. And uh, little occurrences like that happened all year long, you know, and I think it's because you're, it's because it's the very thing we're talking about, you know, like I have my eye on what I want, and I'm recognizing that nothing is an accident, and I'm where I go is where I need to be, you know. Um, the show that I'm on right now is I've been in this space before. I've probably talked about this director before and how he just understands what sacred practices are, you know, and we meditate every morning that we gather. And he switches it up um on how we do things, but he is a monk, and so a practice that he shares with us that I'm sure he would love for more and more people to practice and to understand is like mantras that lead into the meditation. And one mantra that he says to us is, I have arrived. Like, inhale, I have arrived. Exhale, I am home. And it's a reminder to be present, right, as Pam was saying. And as I think as a society we are all coming to the realization of how important it is, because society pulls us away from it, unfortunately, right? Like the modern world. And um, I think that innovation comes from that. I think it comes from being aware of your space and how you can contribute to the world. And I don't want to do things that are not intentional, you know, and that don't have some type of power behind them, associated with them, trying to make some type of change, you know, and do something good. And I think that those are the only things that I grew this year, you know, for me, selfishly, right? Certain things just like, oh, I just really wanted to do them, and I'm so happy that I got to do them. And other things were uh, being in the right place at the right time with the right people, you know, and having a door open for me and stepping through it, you know, like being terrified, but saying like, well, they see something in me, you know, and I want that in me. So maybe I should try, you know, and just see where I get. And uh, it's crazy that it can start that way though. You know, I think that uh, the reality of like what I viewed that pathway to be, right? Like coming into creating things and to creating opportunities for myself. I just thought it was gonna be like a one woman show. You know, I assumed I was going to have to do everything the hardest way. And I think it's because I'm just so conditioned to think that life has to be that way, because I had a fight or flight response my entire adulthood because of my childhood, you know, and feeling like I just needed to get out and be on my own. And then once I was on my own, I couldn't go back, right? So I just had to fend for myself. And I did that for years and years and years. And I think, uh, it was like out of the burnout that I finally was able to accept help. You know, a lot of it was the pandemic too. I think I felt so hopeless during that time. I felt like my plan was ripped away, you know, and I felt like I didn't know how to come back from that. And my attempt to come back from that was just the same approach, you know, it's just like, okay, well, I'm still a one woman show. I'm not going to use any of my contacts and mentors and resources. No, no, no. I'll just go out cold turkey and just give it a shot. And I experienced burnout again, you know, like super early on, because I wasn't just relying on the relationships that I already had built, you know, and also just being honest and open too. like feeling like I needed to put up a front of that everything's actually okay, even though I'm chasing what I want, and never just being open and honest about how badly I wanted something. And it's crazy how many doors have opened since being honest about that, and just saying what I want to somebody, even though it's scary to say because maybe I don't feel like I'm actually there yet, and that what I want is maybe a few years away. But innovation for sure, for sure. And like super cool to think about ideas that I didn't have in April, so the natural evolution of time and how certain ideas have already shifted. In this episode, I looked at my notes to see what my resolutions were for this year. And of course, half of them just aren't relevant anymore. Like half of them, it was a priority then and is no longer a priority. And there's no tea, no shade, like on wanting to pursue those things, because now I have new goals for other things, and other aspirations and other places that I would like to go. But it's all because of just staying open, and allowing perspectives to shift, because I think I can kind of take a little bit of what Pam was sharing about the idea of dreams. I think I have uh two solid dreams, like two pathways. And so the trouble is the tussle, right now they seem like two separate ones. I am trying to make them one, and find this unique space where cat can exist, right? Never before done by I've never seen it happen before, uh, in this like version of this dream. And so I have my eyes on the prize. So if these little things, that I don't get to accomplish, right, that were something that I wanted to do that I was into then don't happen, it doesn't mean that the dream is gone. We're just shifting. And so it's it's a cool space to be. And I I think the only thing that I would add on to it that I am still seeking, and will push into 2025 is collaboration. I think I need to really start building a a tribe of the people who are already in my life who also want to chase hard. That like I think it's important to bring those minds and energies together to create good, because I don't know, I think I've spent a lot of time ruminating with people in amazing ways, about the power that we hold and what we can do in this world. And I think now it's time to kind of start building something, right? So enough of this innovation, right, of like following a path and walking through the door, and now my own way of not navigating it alone.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've been open to accepting things from others, and now it's time for me to invite others in. So we'll see. We'll see.
It's funny because as you were talking, so kind of three points that I have. As you were talking about how when you looked back and you said your the resolutions that you have, half of them don't even resonate anymore. The thing that immediately came up into my head was, this is why I love tarot, right? This is why I love doing these kinds of reads, because the whole concept and the philosophy of tarot isn't that whatever cards come out is a future that is set in stone, right? It's just these are the present energies now, and this is the kind of guidance that they have to give you. But that can completely change based on whatever decision it is that you make. And all of a sudden, the universe will reshape itself and offer you different pathways, different opportunities that you didn't know exist. Um, so I love that you're being open, right, to all of those other possibilities that could be. And then the second thing was when you were talking about community and inviting people to collaborate, that and the circle that you surround yourself by, there's so like there's a reason, right? So many different, whether it be businesses, whether it be career fields, whether it be hobbies or interests, that they have so many events, right? Or conferences or things like that, where people come together and it's like-minded people, and all of a sudden, these ideas come from there. Or even if you think about people who have like inventions and they need investors to back that up. One of the things that when you were talking also brought into my head of, I forget the exact name of the account, but it's an account that I follow, and she is a Hispanic, I want to say second generation or first generation, who is trying to generate generational wealth, right? And one of her biggest aha moments were realizing that she needed to surround herself by other people who were interested in investing, other people who are interested in talking about money and not afraid to talk about money, and learning that there are spaces of people, and the people who are successful in doing that are the people who talk about it, and they invite people with similar interests to be able to grow and teach each other and learn from each other. So I feel that I'm glad that you're seeing that, because it's so easy to say, right? You need community, and we say that all the time, but it's a different layer of it when you recognize what can be accomplished with a community, right? And I think that's something that is not really, America's such an individualist society. It's a very selfish society. It's not by any means a community based mentality of a country, right? And when I look at other countries like Japan that is community based, and I think of, look at all of the amazing things that they're able to do together, right? And going back to my concept of, you think there are so many things that are official or things that you can or cannot do because of certain restrictions, and that reality is bullshit. Like, anything, literally anything can happen. Laws change, they become law, they become not law. And so I think this idea that inviting others and making that reality happen with other people is something that needs to be so importantly echoed for all of you that are listening to us, because even the biggest, most passionate projects cannot be done alone, right? And then the third point is, I think that it's interesting that I'm sure a lot of our listeners are going to resonate with you, because even I was resonating with you, right? With this idea and this feeling that you think that you have to do everything together. And I think that social media does not help, right? I feel like everything that we consume, we assume that everybody does it on their own, or that it happens so easily, or that fame and success and all of that, like, is such an instantaneous uh manifestation, and it really is not. If you think about it, those people, they start alone and they started as a hobby, but then they have to really reach out to other people, or there are certain things that they don't know about and they have to ask somebody else, even if that somebody else is going on the internet. Like, if we didn't have the internet, nobody would know half of the things that we know now. And so I love the idea that you're willing, that you're in that space now, right, of acknowledging, I need to make this happen with a team, and I need to find a good team to make this happen with, you know? And I think it takes a certain level, again, of humility, and maturity to acknowledge that, yeah, I can't do all of this. I need help. I may be an expert in this, but I'm not an expert in that. But I know somebody who is. So let me reach out to them, and again, fuck it, let's see. Maybe they're
Mm-hmm.
interested.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's also like, just again, we need to do an episode about now being in our 30s as
I
like an
know.
homage to our very first episode about 28.
Right.
Because I also think that it's just that season of life, um, this space, because we I want to get the wheels turning, and I'm thinking about a lot of different things that I wasn't thinking about before, right? Like even the idea of being a caretaker, you know, and like wanting to be ready for that when the time comes, because the reality is that it would take time to reach a place where I would feel comfortable, you know, that once it's time for me to have to take care of the people who raised me, you know, like I've seen what that looks like on people, you know, and there are many different ways that that can go. And so how can I already be working towards that today? Right? It starts with simple things like gathering like minds together, you know, to see what impact we can create on the world.
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe 10 years from now, that's all that I'm doing. Who's to say?
Yeah. It was so crazy to see the shift between our mentalities in just 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and the 30s have just started.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They've just
This
I
is
know,
started.
season
it's
one
so
of Friends
true.
and How I Met Your Mother.
It's so true. Oh my God, you're so right. Wow.
And honestly, I think a wonderful way to kind of, which really Kat just inspired me to do, is a wonderful wrap on this type of discussion, and a thank you is to our 20s. You know, I feel like a lot of people, which is great, right? They have a wonderful shed of the 20s. They have a wonderful acknowledgement that that was a terrible decade or a rough decade. And, you know, they're ready to be 30. And it's wonderful, right? It's wonderful to embrace a new chapter, but it's also such an homage to, you know, the type of 20-year-old you were, right? To be ready and be the shedding 30-year-old now. And I feel like that's something that I definitely want to invite all of us to thank as ourselves a year ago, 5 years ago, right? 10 years ago. Our 20s definitely helped us get to be the 30-year-olds we are today. And as painful and as unknowing, unsuspecting as they were, you know, they definitely built us up to be standing where we are right now.
That's very true. That's very true.
Yeah.
I am grateful for that crazy girl.
Yes.
She's crazy.
She's
She's a
crazy.
crazy girl, but I do love her.
But she's just a girl.
She's just a girl. She's still just a girl. Come on.
She's still just a girl.
Really
I
fair.
loved 29-year-old Tess. I love 22-year-old Tess, and I'm so grateful for her. And you know, I think we can all invite ourselves to do that. And even if you're looking back at even younger you, love that younger you, because who you are right now would not be possible without that person behind you. You know, don't forget them, right? Or don't feel like they're less than. They just brought you to where you are now.
Yeah. One of my favorite, I guess I'll say it's a quote, but it was just a realization that I had with a friend of ours, is having grace and gratitude, right, for your young and past self, because she did the best that she could with what she knew at that time, you know. And that's something that I constantly find myself repeating to myself and reminding myself, that not just of me, right, but of other people in my life. And right now, like, I just have to say, bless up to 20s Pam, because she achieved a life goal of going to Japan, and not even going there, but actually living there. She achieved a master's degree. She achieved healing her inner child. So much shit got done.
Bless up.
Yeah, and
Bless
like
up.
Tess said, it's just the beginning of our 30s. Like, what?
Oh my God.
Crazy.
Yeah.
I can't wait.
Yeah. We don't even know what we're waiting for at this point.
I mean, I know one little
35-year-old
piece.
us. 35-year-old us is going to be like, man, those youngins, they didn't even know what was coming.
They ain't no shit.
Exactly. Well, I feel like this is a perfect segue into our last but not least segment of every episode of High Tea Mystique, which will be our tarot read. But before we finalize anything, we are opening up our, we are closing our reflections, I should say, on not only, mindful moments, right, back in April 2024, but this is, quite literally the wrapping of the year. So any final affirmations that are before we go, I guess we could think about it, but also if any thought. First and foremost, I would love to say I have so much gratitude for myself. I have so much love for things that I did not want to go through, but I found myself on the other side of them. So yeah.
Yeah, and I'm grateful for our podcast. I think that it was really pivotal to have this space, you know. I hope our listeners feel the same, like creating a space for yourself to think deeper than you do on the daily and really take those hard looks at yourself, because I feel like we had a lot of tough episodes this season. I think we were just responding to what we were going through in life, and we didn't want to be fake, about what we talked about and how we showed up for you guys. And a lot of growth happened that way. And I think the fun thing to know, like a behind the scenes, right, is we did a lot less scripting for this season. Not that we're ever scripted, right? We're always off the cuff. But if we were, then wow, what a crazy script we would write. But our first season, we had a lot more pre-planning of episodes, right? Like very scripted outlines. We even had like orders in which we would speak, and we had things done pretty meticulously because we thought that that was the surefire way to success. And we naturally learned that the way to succeed is to show up authentically. And so now I would say this season, it's been much more of choosing topics that resonate more ahead of time. Not more ahead of time, less ahead of time. Choosing topics that resonate more in present time. Being adaptive to the current climate of our personal lives and of the world at large. And wanting to be relevant and not be selfish. And talk about something that we just want to talk about. Right? We understand that there's a time and a place for all of those things, and that's a lot of growth. And it's a lot of growth for me as the individual, but the podcast is a reflection of me, so I have to give credit to the way that we have changed because of that.
Yeah.
Sure.
I'm also grateful for this podcast, but most importantly, I feel like we talk about it, right? It gives us that space to reflect for ourselves, and even when we hear it back, we're like, "Wow, I can't believe I said that." But what I'm most grateful for about this podcast is our listeners, right? And the feedback that we get from our friends, because gosh, I remember when when I was starting to talk to Tess about just the idea of a podcast, right? And then on my own accord, I was in a place in life where wanted I knew that I wanted to make a contribution, right? I knew that I wanted to make an impact in this world. I didn't know what it would look like. And then this podcast came along and it felt in alignment with what I wanted to do. It felt in alignment with what we all kind of wanted to do, but I didn't know what the reality of that would be, right? And when you boil it down to the basics, this is just content, right, that we're creating. And so you hope that you're making content that is good as well. And even though podcasts are a platform where really anybody can just talk about anything, and the basis of that content is just talking, I personally would always just think about it and wonder, like, I know that between us three, we are appreciating what we are saying to each other, and we make those comments live sometimes. But there's always that thought, right? And I don't think it's a self-doubt, it's just more of a wonder of how impactful really is this for other people. And I'm always so grateful to hear the feedback from our friends and from our listeners. The other day, one of my coworkers was telling me, "Oh, I haven't heard, your most recent podcast. I haven't been able to keep up, but I just wanted to let you know that the content that you guys are making is genuinely good." And I know that when I'm listening to it, and whatever episode I happen to listen to is actually helpful, right? And or is impacting me. And it's not the first person who's told us that. And I think it's so beautiful, and it makes me so happy and makes me feel so at peace to know that what we're doing with this platform and with this podcast is genuinely helping the people we love, right? And if it's helping the people we love, then that gives me the full faith that we're just going to keep growing and making an even bigger impact. And it motivates me even more to want to grow this podcast, to be able to reach even the people we don't know, right? And the loved ones that are unknown to us at the moment. And so I will always be grateful for that, and for finding a space that allows me to feel fulfilled, right? In Because this was something that for such a long time I was like, I know I have to work to get money, but I need something that's going to also fill this this satisfaction in my soul, right? This hole that I have. And hearing that feedback and being able to do this podcast with you two ladies has been such a great, fulfilling way. And it's such a passionate and soulful podcast, that we really, especially more recently, that we're like what Kat was saying, we were really just taking it in at the moment and trying to feel, right? What is it that's really calling to us? What is it that's really, we notice that all of us are kind of handling or dealing with? And it's so beautiful that when we come to it, or we come to a topic and we think about it, we're like, wow, we didn't plan this, but it just so happened to greatly align with each of our others' experiences. And so the beauty of that, right? And the magic of that, I think, is so beautiful. And I feel so blessed to be able to witness that. And so I'm grateful for all of those things.
Yes.
I'm grateful for our partners who have also joined us too along this ride. I feel like we've had a lot of awesome, amazing guests.
Yes.
Loved hearing
Yes.
them. Yeah, be part of the magic, elevate our mystique. It's been a wonderful season. So I'm super excited to honestly come to a home with all of you as we end season 2. But before all of that, right, we still have one more episode to go. So stay in store for that. But of course, Pam will now be doing our reading for today.
Yes. So because we are doing it virtually, I am using the Moonlight app. We've used it many times before on this episode, but this time I decided to actually look through the spreads, and I decided to pick the one that said give, receive, and create, because I feel that this episode, we've talked a lot about that, right? About you know, starting with our word and reflecting back on that midpoint check-in, right? What did we give at that time? What did we actually end up receiving? And now, as we're ending the year and we're preparing to go into the new year, right? We have these moments of reflection and wanting to kind of set the tone for the new year. So what are some things that we want to create? So I decided to go for that spread. So let's see what comes out. I'm going to press done shuffling. I'm giving, oh, no, you. Combined creation. I'm receiving. I think this one. But I will take this one on the side. Okay. So let's see what we have. Okay. So for I'm giving, we have the sun. It says childhood, freedom, optimism, guiding light, beacons. And I feel like that really aligns well, right, with what we had intended at that time with our midpoint check-in. We were trying to be very optimistic, trying to set the tone for the rest of the year. And even though there was, I feel like that episode, there was a lot of reflection on accomplishments, right? And so I think it's so appropriate that the sun card came here. You know, you look at the child. Most of the times, I feel like this card really tries to highlight the idea of childhood, of what's the word I'm looking for? Almost like a purity, right? Like an innocence. But this time around, I feel like it's more of a celebration. And especially now with this podcast, we're kind of celebrating right the end. We're getting ready to wind down. And I think it's very appropriate that the sun card is in the I'm giving. Especially because even now, right, as we have reflected and have recognized how much we've grown because of that growth, now we can feel in a space of creation, right? We can feel in a space of anything is possible. And we've mentioned it in this episode. For combined creation, we have the Six of Cups and it's in reverse. And so the key terms here says, learning to receive, your turn to be helped, accepting support. So I feel that is everything that we literally have just been saying, right? Kat literally just said that, of acknowledging that she needs to reach out to people. And the Six of Cups is something, it's the card that signifies, right? Collaboration, friendship, an olive branch. The person is giving somebody else this flower, this cup that's filled with flowers. It's beautiful. They're not asking for anything in return. And I think it's such a beautiful affirmation, right? That part of learning to receive is that acceptance and being open to receiving things, even when you didn't work at it. Because even though it wasn't, how can I explain this? So even though you didn't pay for these flowers, right? Because that's the image that's on this card. That doesn't mean you're not deserving of receiving these flowers. That doesn't mean you need to feel like you have to give something of yourself to be worthy of receiving these flowers. This person maybe just wanted to do something nice, or they wanted to help you, or they felt that you needed these flowers today, right? Acts of kindness are exactly that. It's nothing to be expected of in return. And so I think that this being here, especially with how these terms came out, right? Because when I picked the spread, it just said give, receive, and create. But this one is saying I'm giving, I'm receiving, and combined creation. And so I feel that the combined creation is something that is also amplifying the message of, you might be at a point in your life right now that is exactly like Kat, right? Or is exactly like how we've been talking about, that you've been putting in the work and you've been doing a lot of things on your own. And now it's time to allow the universe to reward you for all of your hard work. But if you keep feeling, right, the way that Kat was feeling before, that I have to do everything on my own, or this is a one woman show, you know, that's gonna be, you're gonna be your own worst enemy. You're the one who's gonna prevent yourself from receiving this abundance of what the universe has ready for you, right? Like the Six of Cups, this person has 6 cups filled with flowers, ready to give out. and they're handing it out to you. All you have to do is reach your hand out and take it and accept it and say thank you so much, you know. And for I'm receiving, we have the Knight of Swords in reverse. And some keywords here say think before speaking, second thoughts, pause, the project, strategic, silence. And I feel like that is even to some of the things that we've been saying, right? Of not that you have to always be reactive, but you have to be selective, right? It's this idea of discernment. And part of all of ours, right? With Kat's word and her idea of talk less shit, do more shit. With Tessa's idea of advocacy, it's with my idea of the dream. It's not that you have to be on top of everything all the time and be reactive to every single little thing that comes your way. It's exactly what Kat was saying earlier, right? Like we have a reservoir for our energy and what we're able to give. And because this is in the receiving part, right? Like I mentioned with my dream, even if what you're receiving doesn't feel exactly like what you thought, right? Even though what you're receiving might feel like a pause, might feel like a silence, it's still a strategic silence, right? It's still that pause before being able to say the right thing. And both of these together are going to be able to create this opportunity to have the universe give you the things that you want, right? But for that to happen, you have to be open to that. You have to remind yourself that there is, in the same way that there's beauty in being the sun card and being bright and shining and radiant and giving people all of your energy, there is also a balance with that you cannot give that to everybody, that there has to be a certain level of discernment that you are taking, and that you are making sure that that energy is going to places that are worth it, that energy is going to people who will appreciate it and reciprocate that and give that back to you. And I think once we find that balance, because that's kind of what I'm seeing here, it's a balancing act, right? And it's going to be a continuous cycle of a balancing act. Then that Six of Cups will be upright. And I feel like the cards are all also telling us that right now, I also think it's interesting that the Knight of Swords is here in reverse, especially in this season that we're in, right? Because we're basically in winter. And winter is a time of silence, is a time of, if we look at the cycle, right? This is where a lot of death happens, plants are dying, it gets cold, it gets frigid, animals are hibernating. But that doesn't mean it's the end, right? That doesn't mean that what you have been trying to achieve is all of a sudden gone. It's the universe kind of taking a break, regenerating its energy so that it can spring again in the bloom, and it can so it can bloom again in the spring, and it can be, it can give you this wonderful, beautiful bounty that you are deserving of and that you're ready and prepared to accept. And it's also interesting to me that kind of the two cards that I was between pulling was, in terms of I'm receiving, is the Tower card and the Knight of Swords in reverse. But what actually came out was the Knight of Swords in reverse. And I took that pause, right? I took that silence to kind of think about, and not just pick the card just to try and pick a card quickly so that the read doesn't go on for too long, or so that there's not much silence. I wanted to make sure that I took my time and I felt that I picked the right card that we needed. And that was the big difference between pulling the Tower card and pulling the Knight of Swords. And I think, even though the Tower card may seem scary, right? Like the imagery of it is literally a tower that's being zapped by a lightning. People are flying off of the building and there's fire on it. And even some of the key terms here are everything at once, humbling, major breakthrough, letting go, sudden slip. Actually, it's interesting that the keywords that Moonlight uses for this card isn't necessarily negative. And I think it even coincides with what I was mentioning with the idea of humility, right? And the idea, letting go is here too. And so a lot of the times when we are going to receive the biggest blessing in our life, it happens because a door we were so focused on gets slammed shut in our face. And it was because that door was not meant for you to go through, and it's going to feel in that moment like the Tower card, like, why is this happening to me? And even as we were talking about earlier in the episode, how we all felt so tired and exhausted and so many things were going on, this might be the current energy. This might be like what you feel, but it's not an everlasting moment. And it's something that I think the cards and the universe are trying to remind us that sometimes you just have to let things be, right? And this is a lesson that all of us have been learning, right? Whether it be the acceptance of others, whether it be learning to not allow yourself to treat yourself negatively, whether it be learning to not plan 5 years ahead and just take things one step at a time. Whatever lesson the universe is trying to teach you right now, it's like I said earlier, it's going to feel like a big deal right now, but it's really not that big of a deal. It's not that deep. And it's not that deep because it wasn't meant for you. And the universe is waiting and it's being super patient, right? I feel like the I'm receiving card and the combined creation, these are very much the universe saying, I'm ready to give this to you, bitch. But you're being super stubborn. You don't want to look my way. You're so hung up on this other thing. Let it go. Let it go and see what I have ready for you. You don't know what I have ready. You can't even fathom because there's so much that I can do for you. But you're not willing to give me that chance. And you can feel so optimistic and so childish, and even this sun card here in this I'm giving spot, for whatever reason right now I kind of felt this idea of fake positivity, right? And maybe feeling like, no, I got this all together, I can do this. And it's okay, like, it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to let the universe kind of take the course, let Jesus take the wheel, and see where the wheel takes you, because we can only see to a certain point. We cannot see beyond that. But just because we cannot see it doesn't mean it's not there. And the universe knows that it's there and it's waiting for us to give it to us. But you just have to kind of, like I said earlier, you planted the seed, you've done all the hard work to plant it. Now you just have to wait for that plant to grow, and it's not going to grow on your time. It's going to grow on its time. And then before you know it, all of a sudden you're going to look at it and you're going to see a flower. And you might have forgotten all about that. And you might have forgotten all the hard work that it took. But that doesn't mean you don't get to pick that flower and you don't get to enjoy it. So just, I think if more than anything, these cards are really asking us to be a little bit patient with ourselves, to give ourselves a little grace, and to be open to different possibilities that may be outside of your comfort zone, and that maybe were not exactly according to your plan, because you don't know what beautiful product, what beautiful project, what beautiful whatever it is can come from it. But if you don't reach out into your community, into the universe, and be willing to humble yourself, because honestly, who the hell is anybody to think that they could do everything by themselves? Every single person needs help. We're human. It happens. We're human. We're social. And so just know that it's okay. And if you need a hand, High Team Mystique will be here. We hope that, you can lean on the episodes that we've shared and whatever episode seems to call on you at that time, whether it be from this current season or a previous season, be open to listening to what people have to say and then take that moment, take that step back to think, does this apply to me? Is this something that I should be, taking in? Don't just take in everything for the sake of taking everything, make sure that it is something that is, like Kat said, worth your time and is worthy of your time. And I feel like that's what the cards have for us today. I also think it's, as always so funny, unironically, a little bit scary. But never, it shouldn't surprise me, but it always does, that it's aligned so well with what we've said, and I feel like people could easily say, oh, but maybe you're just saying that, but like these are the words that come out. This is why I love kind of using the tools that we have, and those keywords and the notes and the books and whatever comes with these tarot cards, because I never know what extra messages are going to come until I read them. And Moonlight had these specific terms that are different from what I've seen in other versions of tarot books that explain these meanings. So I think it's so beautiful how everything always comes out aligning with each other. But yeah, that's what the cards have for us today, tonight, this morning. And I hope this helps.
Thank you, Pam, as always. I think what's good about the way that you just brought it together is, I was actually having a conversation about the Tower with somebody recently, and the Tower can be a scary card to pull, but within context, within placement, within energy that surrounds you, nothing is finite, and there's definitely motivation, and even precedence, right, for the Tower card to start bringing to mind something. So I love that we are so open and giving out invitations to meaningful and reciprocative energies. I think it's a wonderful start and end to 2024 into 2025. I have loved looking back, right? Close montage, right, of our flashback episode. I have loved not only kind of evaluating and critiquing and giving each other feedback on what has happened, but also just appreciating all the hard work we have each put in individually. And so proud to say that we are still, like, we are going to truck on and go into 2025 stronger and even more aware of our hard work and our capabilities because of it. All of our facilities and our minds and our bodies attuned to exactly what we're capable of. Yeah. And with that, before we say goodbye, any last thoughts or ideas from our ladies of season 2, 2024, High Team Mystique? It's been amazing.
Well, I want to comment on the tarot read too. I also thought it was wild when Pam elaborated on the two cards that you were torn between, because I just feel like, well, selfishly, as Pam mentioned, I feel like this one really spoke to me. And I think it says a lot about the end of the year, and I think it says a lot to anybody who's feeling very hopeful about next year, and encouragement. And the difference between the two is just what makes it so unique to our conversation, that there are two ways that you can kind of start this journey. And that, you know, what was chosen, you know, catered towards our conversation, but we also spoke about the other, you know, it just wasn't our particular truth, but it had to be mentioned, you know, that there are multiple ways to get to the same goal. Even I talked about how technically I have two pathways to my dreams. And so it's just so cool to see it play out. Totally echo what you said, Pam, about like you just, it's so cool to see those new messages and how every single read, the specificity is wild. Like so crazy. Not only how perfectly the the cards pertain to the topic, but how perfectly they guide in ways that we were already teaching ourselves as we were speaking. Really cool.
Absolutely. And with that, ladies and gents, and everyone in between, we are so excited to bring you one more episode of season 2. We're so excited to bring you season 3 of High Tea Mystique. And more than anything, we are so happy that you're here with us right now. And we hope that you've enjoyed this episode. We hope that you've enjoyed your commute, gotten your chore done, maybe just took a walk around the block and listened to us too. Thank you for bringing us along. We are so happy that you're here and present. And I'll
And
quote
if you're
Kat.
listening on the day that we release the episode, Merry Christmas. Thank you for spending
Merry
your holiday with
Christmas. Happy holidays, everybody.
us.
And to quote Kat, I have arrived and I am home. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.